Hi, friend.
Hi, friend.
And to the brave hearts listening out there, welcome to Permission to be Human. I'm Andrea.
And I'm Janelle.
Get ready for some real-time relationship woo and wisdom
from the front lines with occasional tantrums and tears
about how breaking rules, blurring boundaries, and tossing tradition can be catalysts for finding your truth.
Let's debunk the fairy tales we were told as children and create a new map for life.
Yes, Disney can go fuck itself.
If you're seeking permission to choose your own path,
freedom is the new F word, people,
and want to feel less alone along the way,
we got you. Please note, this is our side of the story. Our partners and metamors have their own individual experiences, and we do not speak for them. Hi, Janelle.
Good morning, Andrea.
Well, it's post-Thanksgiving week.
It is. My dad has left, and he was here for his 5-day visit. It was so great. And thank you so much. I know you got to see him a bunch of times. What I wanted to call out was that the spirit crowns ended up being a theme of my week.
Really?
Yes, because for my dad, I've been in Colorado for 30 years. He knows lots of my old friends who I haven't seen as much recently. And I had a big dinner party with them where they came to the Goddess Temple for the first time. And I had everybody wear spirit crowns. And it was such a beautiful, energetic shift. I was very intentional. I was like, I really wanted these because I felt like it would help give a flavor and a feel to how my life is now, which is not how it was before. And so we did that. It was so fun.
Let's identify, though, for brave hearts listening who don't know what a spirit crown is.
Spirit crowns are unique pieces of art designed by Sophie Howell, which are designed to bring out your inner goddess. And you wear them on your head. They tie onto you. They're these elaborate, exquisite, pieces of art.
They include flowers and feathers and beads and brocade and all matter of creativity in all different shapes and sizes.
Yes. And so we'll post them on Instagram. You can also go to spiritcrowns.com to see them. And they're sort of like a part of the brand of Permission to be Human.
If you can imagine walking into the Goddess Temple, something else that Janelle does, as soon as anyone walks in, she has this little bottle of what it's called glister. That's gold gel glitter. You bring someone in close to you, and what do you say?
I invite them to hold the jar of glister to their heart, close their eyes, take a deep breath, and then scan for where on their body needs some glitter. And then they decide, then I apply it, and then I would say, welcome to the Goddess Temple.
Her 92-year-old dad got to experience the glister on his forehead, and he also wore a spirit crown.
And not only wore one, he wore one pretty much every day he was here because there was always an event, such as going to cheer you on.
Right. So I ran the turkey trot here in Denver. And the turkey trot has been going on since 1973. It was the 50th year anniversary. It's older than me.
Wow.
It's a 4-mile run around Wash Park. So this year I really wanted to run it. I was going to be in town. But this time I couldn't find anyone to run with me. And so I put the call out on my choir WhatsApp thread. And I had a person who I hardly know say, yeah, I'll do it. And so he joined me along with one of my clients. And we decided to wear elf costumes and Santa costumes. So that's what we did. So he and I wore an elf costume, and my other friend wore a Santa costume that she just happened to have in her closet because that's what burners do, I think. Yeah. So we ran the turkey trot, and it was super fun. It wasn't that cold. And I'm running along, and suddenly I hear someone screaming my name, and I look over, and Janelle and her dad are wearing these massive spirit crowns. Big ones.
Big ones. I'm also wearing a lavender glitter flong fur coat.
Yes, of course you are. Because that's what you wear. And the funny thing is that my daughter, at the end of that race, she was really she was excited, engaged, jacked up. And she said, well, we couldn't find them. And we were both looking at each other thinking, how could we possibly miss a 92-year-old man and a really tall woman wearing a spirit crown with bold fashion choices?
And what was amazing is that I hadn't told her what I was wearing. So I was wearing exactly what she thought I was wearing. But the other really fun part of the spirit crowns is that I was debating. I was like, do I bring them to Thanksgiving? I don't know. Because Thanksgiving was at my sister-in-law's, and she has 3 boys who are all teenagers. And then it was going to be my stepson, my former partner, and grandparents. And I was like, well, are the boys going to do it? I don't know. And I brought them. I was like, I'm just going to do it. I'm just going to bring in this like feminine, fun influence and see what happens. And everyone got so into it. All of the boys did as well. They're the first ones to put it on. And it was so fun to see the spirit crowns that they picked. So even though we had the crackers, like those crackers that pop that have the plastic or the paper crowns, which is what we usually wear, everyone was willing to wear a spirit crown at the turkey dinner table. I have pictures every day. My dad wearing a spirit crown.
That's amazing. So he like had 3 or 4 different spirit crowns on. And just to give you a little more tidbit, I mean, the spirit crowns are beautiful and they are feminine, I would say. Yes. Like more feminine than masculine.
Yeah, they're bringing out your goddess. Like you on the masculines, like you can have the goddess within you too to bring out the goddess. So they're definitely feminine.
I love that you did that. Okay. So it's been a good week.
Yes.
We're happy and grateful for our friends and family.
Yes.
And today we're talking about, your ego versus your calling, otherwise known, I would say, as your evil twin versus your inner witch. And so I shall explain. 10 years ago, I printed out this article back in the time when you did that. You printed an article and you put it in a file as a word concept. It was called 5 Ways to Discern Your Ego from Your Calling. And I just thought it was so interesting. And just recently, I got it out again because it has come up again.
Can I just jump in there? Because I'm hearing these words and you and I had this conversation about them. So you're saying ego equals evil twin, calling equals inner witch. I probably would use the word like personality as synonymous to ego, and spirit and or knowing as synonymous to calling and inner witch.
Yeah. Or you could say intuition.
Or intuition. Yeah. So just pointing out that you might not have heard these terms that Andrew's referring to, but you've probably heard the concept. They just might be under different words.
Exactly. So I'm just giving it my own flavor. And I should credit Shelley Prevost. She is the author of this article a long time ago. I don't know where she is now. I've tried to Google her, but I'm grateful for her for writing this initial article that I've referenced so many times. And the question is, which one are you listening to? And are you brave enough to know the difference? Mine are often fighting in a battle, right? I hear one voice, I hear the other voice. I hear one voice, I hear the other voice. And I feel like it's practice, an ongoing practice to shut the one up and listen harder for the other one. Now, the ego isn't pointless. Like it has built our personality, our achievements, our life. So there's not necessarily anything wrong with it. And at the same time, if you're just listening to ego, then at least I've found eventually there's a problem.
I would probably describe the problem as there's a dissatisfaction, confusion,
lack of fulfillment. So I got this article back out because in the current transition I'm in, I'm often distracted by my evil twin, who's very worried about money and the future and the what ifs and the worst case scenarios. And I'm trying to learn to listen to the spirit of my inner witch. But it's hard. And I often resist. I'm listening to my evil twin and I'm resisting my inner witch. She's whispering. She's not talking very loud. There's no proof about what she's saying. It sounds kind of dreamy, sounds kind of bullshitty. I'm not really sure if I should believe her. And I've always said, to be honest, I've had a dysfunctional relationship with my intuition, so bad that it eventually threatened to pack up and leave. It's going to abandon me because I'm never listening to it. For many, many years, this has been true. And I'd say for the last 5, I've really started to tap into it. And what this really equals is I didn't trust myself. And so you can imagine when you don't trust yourself, then every decision you make is did I make the right decision?
Right. You're second guessing everything.
Second guessing fucking everything.
So it's really interesting that you're saying that you're only starting to trust it in the last 5 years. When I would say from the stories that you have shared, let's just talk about Peace Corps.
No, you're right. Yeah.
It feels because every time you've gone off the beaten path, off of mainstream, off of what you were taught as a child from parents, culture, rom-coms, whatever, that seems to me that's you listening to your inner witch and your intuition, but somehow you're not giving it yourself credit that you've been listening all along. There's just ones that are harder. It's when it's not as obvious or something. I don't know.
Yeah, no, it's a great question because I think this is something that my editor has pointed out. Wait a second, you've done all this crazy shit. Clearly, you've been listening to your intuition, your inner witch for a long time. And I don't really know. I don't know what the answer is to that. I feel like maybe because I run so anxious, I make those decisions And although I don't remember regretting them or thinking they were wrong, and this includes, going to the Peace Corps, becoming polyamorous, sending my child to a Waldorf school, having her in a birthing center instead of a hospital, like all this just weird stuff that's not part of the mainstream. And so maybe I'm not giving myself enough credit and that I did know how to listen to it to some extent, but it remains unexplored. And that's unanswered. I don't know. Maybe I haven't worked it out yet. Yeah. Do you have a theory?
I don't have a theory, but I'd like to offer a reflection here, if I may.
Shocking. I'm so shocked that you have a reflection.
Which is that everything that you're describing, Peace Corps, birthing center, school, it was like a decision had to be made. And it was like, are you going to do this or not, or do this? Like there was like a Y in the road. But there was a concrete result on the other end, which was you're either going to do Peace Corps or you're not. But like Peace Corps was the thing. You were having a baby. Where were you going to have it? It was going to be in a hospital or it was going to be this. And so...
School. Is she going to traditional school or is she going to Waldorf?
Right.
Like, yeah.
So it feels like when there is a contrast or like two things to choose between, there's a trust of, you're going to evaluate and listen to your inner witch when the contrast or the choice, when the choice is there. But you're not in a choice right now. You are in, I don't know what your analogy would say, but you are in wide open water and you don't know which way shore is. And so you're having to trust without a visual, without a choice in front of you.
You're so brilliant. Like, that's totally true. That seems exactly right. Like, I could visualize all of those choices before. Here's what I do. If I didn't, here's A, B, C choice. And now, I don't know what things look like. In fact, I know the why and I don't know the how or the what sometimes. And I think to your metaphor point, this has become up a lot lately that I feel like my anchors have all been loosened. And so I have a lack of grounding. I'm floating and I need grounding. And I think you recognize that I was kind of like, I'm at sea. I'm not anchored. Sometimes I'm floating. Sometimes I'm swimming. Sometimes I'm drowning. Sometimes I'm at the bottom of the fucking lake. That's how it feels. And it's very disorienting. Plus I'm a fire sign. What the fuck? What's up with this water analogy?
And I'm a combo. I'm Aries, so I'm an Aries sun, but Pisces, moon and rising.
Oh, and I don't know what I am. So anyway, yes, I'm a fire sign. What the fuck? I'm lost at sea. What am I supposed to do? My fire's out.
Fred.
Yeah.
My fire's not out. Your fire is not out. Let me rest assure you. But okay, so now with that, right, is just this recognition of this, just to like kind of bring into the transition you're in right now. I hear you saying that you have a sense of a why. Do you want to say what your why is?
I know I need to express. My why is I need to express and impact others.
Okay, great. And then the how, you have some of the hows.
I have some of the hows. Yeah. I have some of the hows, but I don't know which one's going to be the right one. I feel like there's all these different how paths. I don't know which one's going to lead to fulfillment, which one's going to lead to money, which one's going to... That's okay. I don't know. It's not clear. It's blurry. I wrote a whole blog about this when I was in Bulgaria. Oh yeah. Have we talked about this? Like, I realized... You'll have to stop me if I've already told this story. When I lived in Bulgaria during the Peace Corps, I would get up in the morning and I would forget to put in my contacts because the flat we were living in was so small, like I didn't have to see very far. So I didn't realize my contacts weren't in. And so I would get downstairs and come out onto the big, busy Vasilevsky Street and walk the half hour to my NGO. And it wasn't until I got down there that I'd look up at the light and it was like blurry. And I was like, fuck, I have to go back upstairs and put my contacts in. And so one night I went out onto this little balcony that was at the top of the stairs in this super shitty communist block where we lived. Like there was nothing romantic about this balcony, right? Like Patti Smith never had coffee here. I'm looking out and there's there's no curly cues. There's no it's not a cool fire escape in any way. There's just a bunch of broken trash cans and bikes and gravel in the backyard or back drive of this apartment building. But I didn't have my contacts in and I was like, oh, it's a little bit blurry. And I was like, oh, am I missing the bliss of the blur? Because I so want to know the certainty. I want to know, I want signage. I want you to tell me when you're hungry. I want you to tell me what's going on. I want to know. And I realized that it's kind of nice when it's a little bit blurry. And there's some kind of beauty in that. So I guess I'm coming back into that right now. Can I find the bliss in the blur of not knowing? That's what it feels like. It's very foggy. I have a sense of my what's and my hows, but it's not clear. So I've been reading a book called Hidden Blessings. And this is really what the resistance is about. And the trouble is that there's a quote in here from someone's journal, a client of the author. And here's what she says. I feel like I'm in a very fine, subtle, and delicate process. I imagine this to be the weaving of a new psychological structure. I wonder what this new being taking shape out of the remains of me will look and feel like. I wait, hovering somewhere between what was once me and who I am becoming. When I do not worry if I'll get somewhere, I experience pleasure, peace, and even some excitement. So that last line is like really what resonates for me, is that if I'm so anxious about what's next, then I'm missing the bliss of the blur. I'm missing the present moment, I'm missing the process, and I'm also missing the transformation or the mourning or the letting go that needs to happen.
Yeah, but there's so much that's happening. There's actually so much happening in you
So much
right now.
For fuck's sake.
And some of it, of course, what I'm hearing is like there's fear, there's anxiety, there's constriction, there's grief, but that it's a little bit harder for you to also be like, oh, and there's a blossoming. There's a seed that's been planted. There's something forming that's not yet formed. And the curiosity and the wonder of what will it be and who will you become is also present.
Yeah, and as you voxed me last night, you said, all of this seems like you're falling into your truth. And so I do think that is true, but it's slow and it's painful. It's taking for fucking ever.
Because you were like, I don't know if I trust myself. That was part of the exchange.
We haven't even talked about it yet.
I do feel like you trust yourself, but you're like, you said you trust it's going to work out. And I was like, what I feel like is actually arising in you is this an incredible impatience to wanting the end to be now, but you trust the end. You just want the end now.
Yeah, I think that is true. And I'm also like, oh, am I going to miss the sign? Am I going to miss the action I'm supposed to take? And you're like, I don't think you're really missing any actions. You know how to listen to spirit, but I have to remain open, right? And as the book talks about too, there is this tendency to just fill up this emptiness with your old self.
Right. Or distractions.
And escape. Yes. Exactly. And so trying to discern for me between the distractions and the escape is pretty challenging. I think you said last night, because I'm a manifesting generator.
Human design reference.
Human design. New things, new productivity, new activities do fill me and make me feel more alive. You know, things like joining the choir and going to silent disco and starting a 20-day video series or whatever. So I'm working with that, but it is a constant battle. And so I want to talk about now the difference between your inner witch and your evil twin, how to recognize the difference and what they embody and what they look like. So what I've determined over time, a blend of the article I read and my experience now, is that my evil twin typically follows this wave. It's anxiety, attainment, anxiety, attainment, and just over and over, right? I'm anxious and then I get what I'm looking for and then I get anxious again, right? And so getting what you're looking for could be like that awesome new sparkly shirt or a new client or more money or something that's coming in, but has diminishing returns maybe.
Mm-hmm. It's what it sounds like is you're anxious about getting to the goal. Then you get the goal and then you're like, okay, fuck, now I've got another goal. So I'm anxious again.
Exactly. I don't celebrate it. I don't enjoy it. I just get it. And I've talked about this so much with stuff anyway. It's like just you get the stuff and you like it for a couple of weeks and then you're like, oh, I want something new now.
Right. Yeah. In a way, this reminds me of Chuck, our 3 to 5 hour former business coach, who used to say, goals do not provide fulfillment. Goals that can be accomplished do not provide fulfillment. It's the goal that's not accomplishable that you could work towards your whole life.
Yeah, I really remember that. So important to have a why beyond the money.
Yes, or the thing that you can check a box off. Because once the box is checked, then you're left empty again.
Yeah, it's so good to hear that again. And that was such a big tenet of how he said about building a business, putting together your business plan. Great, have things that are check-offable and make sure one of those things is not check-offable. I think this is what I did for a long time. I was anxious, I attained. I was anxious, I attained, right? And so on the escalator of life, in the beginning, I was aiming toward having a husband, house, kids, money, success. And I think I went through the first wave of this at 30. When it didn't deliver, I was like, why do I feel empty? I was told this was the track. Everyone told me this is the right track. I'm doing what I thought I was supposed to do. I got the resume, I got the job, I did all these things, and then I felt empty. And that's when we went to the Peace Corps.
Right. empty and unfulfilled. And so that's what was like, okay, wait, what's happening?
We took a different track.
Right. So you followed your inner witch at that moment.
Right. Followed my inner witch, because your inner witch typically follows a different wave. Your inner witch is about inner knowing and expression. And that can look a variety of different ways, however you want it to look. And that expression can be going back to school, or it could be wearing a great outfit, or it could be writing a book. But it's some inner whisper that you're listening to and then expressing that.
You've said a few times that the inner witch she's whispering and she's quiet. So how is it that you hear her?
It's a challenge. It's being quiet and being alone. But I have to say, like, you're like, very good. You answered correctly. You're like, come on, Andrea, you know. I do, but I will say it at 30, I was not spending any time alone. Like, you know, so it piped up and I listened and we went. Because I wasn't fulfilled. I was like, so clearly like, oh, this is not working. Something's not right. But yes, in the last 5 years, it's been through time spent alone and really getting quiet and still.
And sitting in the discomfort of that quiet and stillness.
For sure. In the beginning, it was super uncomfortable. It's much less uncomfortable now. Like, I need that time. I crave that time. And if I don't get it in the morning, I miss it. And I'll mention that as I'm writing my book, my editor, Edith, she's very good at asking me questions and like digging a little bit deeper, kind of like a therapist. And I grew up in a very fast-paced household, very loving and beautiful, but very fast-paced. We just moved at a clip. And she said, when people are moving fast, you know, they're not looking at something. Israelis are moving fast because it's hard to look at the trauma that they're going through, regardless of this current situation. But like all the time, there is just a lot going on. She mentioned New Yorkers moving fast because it's a hard life in the city. And if they stop still and look at it too long, it's disturbing. And this is her opinion. And just like whenever you're going so fast, you're not really stopping to take a look. And I think that's what I eventually have done. But it's hard because when you first try to do it, you're just like, this is so uncomfortable. I'm not doing this anymore.
I definitely did the same thing. I moved very fast. And, you know, when I was single in my 20s and 30s, like I would go out 7 nights a week. I was always out. I was like, oh, I've got 2 extra hours. Great. I'm going to fill it with something.
Yes. That was the whole thing. You just filled it up. That was what I did too. I thought that was what I was supposed to do. Another way to discern is the focus. So the evil twin is focused on doing something and having something, right? It's very much about cultural conditioning, preserving your personality, the ego. The inner witch is focused on being something. It's like a conduit between your true self and your truest expression. How you express it hardly matters. So we've got the do from the evil twin and the be from the inner witch. So the survival, as we just touched on, is that evil twin requires anxiety and noise to survive, right? You have to keep worrying. You have to keep panicking. It's about the musts, the oughts, the shoulds, the what ifs. Go, 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 go. You're out of time. Like, you better hurry up. And the inner witch requires patience, silence, and trust. Its communication is more subtle, right? And it does require a lot of alone time. And I think that the silence and the alone time has to come first. And then over time, you build the trust in that. But in the beginning, it feels unsafe. It feels unfamiliar. And as we said, pretty uncomfortable.
What I think's really beautiful in listening to you is that, like, you put together this podcast, like you've written this out. This is an article you've referenced. This is a book that you're reading. You actually know all of this very rationally. I've also seen you live it, like live your inner witch. And then I see you forget, which is what we all do. I think that's what's like really interesting, is that it's a constant. It's not like, oh, once you get a lesson for some of this stuff.
Not like riding a bike.
It's not like riding a bike. And like, oh, I've never forget that. I'm going to know how to do that forever. It's like, oh no, it's like right here in this podcast. And I'm like, you know the answer to the question. You know the answer to this question already. But yet it doesn't prevent you from your evil twin from rising often and being like, I don't know where I'm going. And then you being like, fuck, this is still really hard. It's almost as if there's an expectation. I'm looking to see where it says this. Sure. So where it says like the inner witch requires patience, silence, and trust, that you're constantly having to build, remind yourself to trust. Like, you have trusted and then you forget. You have trusted and then you forget.
Because I just keep forgetting. It's frustrating. It's really hard. And to the point that we made last night on our boxes, sometimes you're suffering, you can't make sense of it. You can't always be like, oh, this must have happened because of this. That doesn't come right away. Sometimes that takes years to like show up. And so for some of this, I'm just like, oh yeah, I see. I'm supposed to go through this because of this. And other stuff, I'm just like, no, this is just shitty. I don't really have an explanation for this. And like finding the meaning isn't always easy and it's not always accessible.
And it reminds me of my phrase that I've been saying lately, which is in following spirit, I say that, oh, I'm in the flow of the magic and the miracles. And it also means that there's class 5 rapids. I'm in the flow, but the river just got really fucking scary and I'm holding on for dear life. And I'm like, God damn it, I didn't expect this. And there's still magic and flow happening. I'm just really scared at the same time.
You know what class 5 rapids makes for? Such a good story.
Such a good story and often great photos.
We were in Uganda, my husband and I signed up for this rafting trip. Like we got into this hostel, middle of the night, Africa, like on a bike taxi, don't know where we're going, super crazy, and went down the Nile over 5 waterfalls in a boat where you fall out of the boat and then some rescue canoe comes and gets you when you fall out. Pushed under the water, can't get up under the water. I mean, like the scariest, by far most dangerous thing I've ever done. Like nothing even comes close. There's no ambulance waiting for you in case something happens. Nothing. No, there's no EMT. We are in the middle of nowhere. I can see monkeys on the sides of it. Like class 5 rapids, fucking hard.
Fucking hard. Yeah. And you did it. You actually did it anyway. You actually paid to do that.
I always said after that experience, so like, if I had known what we were actually doing the night before, I never would have done it. It's just a little too above my risk grade.
Except it's such a beautiful analogy to life. You raised your hand for this life, and here you are.
I know. Oh my God. My husband and I talk about it all the time. We're like, oh, yep, more intensity. This is what we signed up for. Yeah, it's really true. The evil twins' goal is the outcome. Future focused. And as you can see why that's always a problem, because you're never in the now. You're always like, what's next? What's next? And it's also like strengthening the rope between productivity and worth. And I'm always saying that like I'd like to fray that. I had this beautiful, magical soul I met at Folk Fest this year who I sat and talked to her for like 2 hours. It was like, no, I don't want to fray the rope. I want to lay the rope down. I want the rope to be so loose that it just falls to the ground. So just been thinking about that, like the connection between my productivity and my worth.
It was interesting compared to the episode that we just did recently on money, where I was saying, oh, like the amount of money in his bank account was tied to one specific bank account was tied to my worth. And I didn't mention productivity, but that used to be my measurement of success, was how productive was I in a day. And letting that rope fall, as you just described, is a deep practice. And it requires deep trust.
Yeah. And that is also something that just like needs to be, it's not a lesson learned. It's just a constant reminder. Like I forget about it and then I do it again. And then I forget about it and do it again.
The word is it's a practice. It's a lifelong practice.
Yep. Just like meditation. You don't get good at it and then you're done. And so while the evil twins' goal is the outcome, the inner witch understands that it's about the process. It's in the process.
And in the journey in that way. Like the journey.
Yeah, that's a better word. And enjoying the process, like enjoying the now, enjoying the writing of the book as well as the book itself.
I remember, isn't that what Cheryl Strayed said in some podcast on We Can Do Hard Things, and you're like, oh, that's what I've been doing. I've been so attached to who's going to like reading my book that it's prevented me from writing my book.
Yeah, that's so funny that you say that. That was like probably a couple of years ago. Yeah. I remember being on the airplane and like boxing you and being like, oh my God, I just got something from Cheryl Strayed. She was more about like the point of that was embracing your mediocrity.
Oh, okay.
Like right. Just fucking being mediocre. Like you're not going to be the top best-selling book in the world. And fuck, of course, what people think of my book is actually none of my business. It's really not. My goal is to put it out. And what people do with it is totally up to them. It is going to land differently for every person. In this way, I love the beauty of Clifford Still, a museum here. None of his paintings have titles on them. At first, I'm like, oh, I still want there to be a title, especially because I like to title things in general with words. But it's so beautiful because he just did it and he puts it out and he lets people decide what it is to them. And so there's no label. And so in the same way, yeah, I'm, my book just has to be like, whatever, I make it and not worry too much about what people think of it. So it's all in the process. And the inner witch also wants to positively impact others. This self will be impacted, but the idea is about a greater purpose for the collective.
Yeah. And I think something I've learned in that is, I think in our culture, there's something what can be perceived, especially for women, as like being selfish. If like you're doing something, if you're benefiting from something that's also for others. And I think that is there's a real disservice to all of us. Like in the way, and I described this the other day on our podcast about money, which is about that. Yeah, I am figuring out how to pay and steward the goddess temple into being, which to me has this idea like for the collective, for community, and I get to live in a beautiful home as a result. It doesn't mean like, oh, I shouldn't live in a beautiful home because I'm doing something for the collective, right? That there's something about
the martyr. It's the anti-martyr.
Yeah, versus being like, oh, I get to also benefit and enjoy and receive from what I'm giving to others.
Yeah, and this receiving, this gets into the existential kink a bit as well, because I think when we're accustomed to the giving and like, no, I need to suffer. I'm going to give to you. Part of the deal is that I suffer. Part of the deal is that I complain. And the ultimate in the existential kink is I'm complaining and then someone gives me a solution and I say, no, don't give me a solution because then I can't complain.
Exactly.
And so you're saying, no, I don't have to suffer to give other people things. I can enjoy the goddess temple and be okay with that. So you're giving and receiving at the same time.
And I actually think learning how to receive is actually a key to fulfillment on this plane in this lifetime. And it doesn't mean receiving makes us selfish. Receiving is actually how we create the abundance within our being to be able to then give to others.
That was beautiful. Okay, so finally, the manifestation. So actions from the evil twin will eventually result in burnout. Can you relate to this?
Yes, I have had very specific times in my life where I burned out.
And I feel like there was a time, it was probably more than 7 years ago. Yeah, it was before all of our crazy life started, where I like every 10 to 12 weeks, I would crash. And my husband started noticing this pattern of me just like too stressed, too much to do. I can't take it. Like needing to lie down or just like not knowing what to do with all this energy or crying. And he's like, look, this just happens every so often with you because you're just going so hard and you're not getting fulfilled by it. And I see that happening. That totally happens to people. It's just fairly normal in our society. Ego ends in burnout because it's consuming resources you don't have in order to push you toward a bigger, better version of yourself. My favorite definition of burnout is this. Burnout is not about giving too much of yourself. It's about trying to give what you do not possess.
And I read that in this script and I loved it because how I view this now, like on a almost like on a daily level, is whenever my resource level drops to the point where I'm noticing it, then it's like, oh, time to fill it up, because otherwise I'm not going to be able to be in service at the level of which I want to give. So that means in order for me to top up my resourcing, in my case, that means sleep, it means food, it means massages, it means probably talking to a friend. So I realize, like when you were saying you would go like 10 to 12 weeks before you would essentially resource yourself, I have done the same thing. And I'm like, oh, wow, like on a daily basis, I'm like, what's my resource level? I need to top it back up.
Wow, that is so different. And at that time, I mean, self-care was just something I didn't do. I didn't know. Wasn't a thing in the media either. It just was like something I've never been good at self-care though.
But this is the same concept where we think, oh, self-care is selfish, like I'm supposed to be giving, when actually, if you give self-care to yourself, then you're less likely to be under-resourced in talking to your husband and to your kid.
Of course, I mean, it's the oxygen mask on the plane thing, right? It's for sure. But I wonder, why do you think you didn't self-care when you did go through burnout, or like didn't realize that, you didn't take care of yourself maybe, or like didn't take time for you? Why do you think you didn't?
There was an expectation, whether it was an external or often for myself. Like I can think of one specific time when I was working at the lingerie company and we were launching a new website and it just like went off the rails. And I was working basically like 16 hours a day for many days in a row, trying to like meet this deadline and not being able to like admit that the project that I was running wasn't going well. Yeah. So just like basically just like trying to force my way to a solution.
And you feared the failure
of myself and the ramifications and all, and thinking I can do it all. I can fix it all. I think that's one of the other challenges. Burnout is, I think, also a tendency of people who actually are capable of doing a lot of things. And so what they're not doing then is taking care of themselves because they're also not delegating.
Yeah, true. And this is like, oh, you can have it all. You can do it all.
Right. And so I was definitely caught in that. I was like, oh, I have a lot of skills. I quote unquote, should be able to fix this problem.
Yeah.
And it's my problem to fix.
Yeah. I think for me, it just goes back to the productivity. Like, well, I'm not going to take time to pee because that doesn't get anything done. I'm not going to go get gloves. I'm not going to eat because I'll be fine if I don't eat. And eating is not pushing me toward my goal.
Those exact same things. When I realized how much food and sleep and clothing's one of my like expressions of the world, I denied myself, and massages, because I was like, oh, all those things are luxuries. Very distinctive. I used to be like, oh, I'm sleeping too much. I'm not going to spend money on that food. I'll wait and snack 4 hours from now when I'm at home. And I don't have the money for massages and clothing. All 4 of those things, I would say, are like the 4 number 1 things that resource me.
Interesting. It's good you can identify them, actually. I think that's a good challenge. How do you resource yourself? So in contrast, the actions from the inner witch don't lead you to burnout. They eventually result in fulfillment, and probably sooner rather than later. Another author, I know, Friedrich Buechner, says that your calling is, quote, the place where your deep gladness meets the world's deep need. Really beautiful.
Yeah. I'm such a sucker for a Venn diagram, and that's such a good Venn diagram image.
So we've talked about the ego versus the calling, which I am calling the evil twin versus the inner witch. And I really encourage you to see if you can decipher them. Just first start by deciphering them. Oh, wait, is that my evil twin or is it my inner witch? And just keep listening and see if you can discern the difference, and see if you can start listening to your inner witch instead of your evil twin.
And of course, there's some resources that Andrea has mentioned. There's this article by Shelley Provost, and then there's a book, Hidden Blessings.
Yeah, by Jet Saras, PhD. So with a foreword by Gay Hendricks, who I'm also a really big fan of too.
Oh yeah, Conscious Relationships.
Yeah,
exactly. One of my favorites.
Yeah, I think I learned something in this episode. Isn't that so great? I love the process. I'm embracing it.
Here we are. This is it. This is life. This is the journey.
In real time.
Okay, Bravehearts, thanks for listening.
We love you.
Do you need permission to be human? You got it. Listen, subscribe, and review on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. Learn more about us at permissiontobehuman.live.